Next on Currents News, the Pope gives 7 people the highest honor the Catholic Church can bestow. They are now saints. A delegation from the Brooklyn Diocese was on hand when the holy people were canonized by the Pope. The Holy Father has expelled from the priesthood 2 Chileans accused of sex abuse. Ousted are an archbishop and a bishop. President Trump visited Florida and Georgia today for a first-hand look at the devastation left behind after Hurricane Michael. Plus, one of the great events in the Brooklyn Diocese, the Shining Star Awards, going to people devoted to welcoming the stranger. The news starts right now. The majesty of the church is on full display as Pope Francis makes it official. 7 more holy people are in heaven. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. The canonizations of Archbishop Oscar Romero, Pope Paul VI, and 5 others took place before a huge crowd in St. Peter's Square. Francis began the ceremony with words that have been used in the church for centuries.
Santos esse decernimus et definimus. Ac Sanctorum Catalogo ascribimus.
2 towering figures of the 20th century Catholic Church, Pope Paul VI and martyred Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Romero, canonized at a Mass in St. Peter's Square. The ceremony taking place before some 70,000 faithful, including dignitaries and hundreds of prelates and clerics. 5,000 Salvadoran pilgrims traveled to Rome to honor Romero, a man considered a hero to many Latin Americans. 5 other blesseds were also recognized: Francesco Spinelli, Vincenzio Romano, Maria Catarina Casper, Nazario Ignacia Marsh Mesa, and Nuncio Sulprizio. The significance of the occasion and the strong influence Saints Romero and Paul VI had on Francis, prominently demonstrated by the pontiff, who wore the blood-stained rope belt the Salvadoran Archbishop wore when he was gunned down by right-wing death squads in 1980. He also used Paul's staff, chalice, and pallium vestment. During the canonization Mass, Pope Francis shared a strong message of sacrifice, humility, and piety.
Per questo la ricchezza è pericolosa e, dice Gesù, rende difficile persino salvarsi. Non perché Dio sia severo, no. Il problema è dalla nostra parte. Il nostro troppo avere, il nostro troppo volere ci soffocano.
The Pope invited everyone to follow in the footsteps of these saints and pray for the grace to fully trust in Jesus.
Senza un salto in avanti nell'amore, la nostra vita e la nostra Chiesa si ammalano di autocompiacimento egocentrico.
The Holy Father said that freedom from worldly indulgences comes when Jesus is fully trusted. Catholics of Brooklyn and Queens formed a delegation from the Brooklyn Diocese that traveled to Rome for the canonizations. Melissa Butts is standing by at the Vatican with that group and reports they have a special devotion to one saint.
Brooklyn and Queens were well represented this weekend here in Rome, as you can see behind me. They came to see the canonization of 7 saints, but most importantly that of Archbishop Oscar Romero. Sunday's canonization of Archbishop Oscar Romero was an exciting moment for this group with Latin roots from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. Father Carlos Caggiano led the group from Queens, New York, to participate in this ceremony with Pope Francis.
Something that will be in our memories forever, because it was a moment of glorification, but also a joyful moment for the church, for the Christian, and for those who were killed in El Salvador in the name of God. It took a Latin American Pope to recognize that beautiful gift for the church. So for me and for us, I think it was a beautiful moment of grace and joy to be shared with the people in El Salvador.
It was one in a lifetime. We were able to, with the sacrifice that we did, getting up so early in the morning with Father Carlos and a friend Deacon, we were right in the first place in the beginning, and we were able to see Pope and pray with Pope and pray for the church.
Father Carlos even brought his mother with him to Rome. She moved from her home in El Salvador to Canada years ago after Archbishop Romero told her to in a dream.
Entró a mi cuarto
He appeared in my room and said, "One son is already gone. You can go too. Get your papers in order and go. I'm very proud and happy to see Monsignor Romero canonized." Additionally, the group saw Pope Francis Monday morning in Paul VI Audience Hall, where he spoke about St. Romero to the thousands of people present.
He showed up. I guess he wanted to see his people, and it's something that he loves the Spanish people with the respect of the other people, but he comes alive, and he's always so funny.
During this encounter, the people asked Pope Francis to make Oscar Romero a doctor of the church, something that would give this group an additional reason to celebrate. After participating in Sunday's canonization mass and meeting the Pope on Monday morning, this group is saying goodbye to Rome as they make their way back to Brooklyn. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
All right, thank you, Melissa. The brothers of Oscar Romero were at the Vatican for the canonizations. Gaspar and Tiberio were at the head of the line of people waiting to get into St. Peter's Square. The 88-year-old Gaspar said the event helped El Salvador become better known in the world. Tiberio, who's 93, said he was proud because the Salvadoran people love St. Oscar so much. In the country's capital, San Salvador, large crowds, fireworks, hugs of joy welcomed the news that Romero was now a saint. He's considered a hero among many for standing up to an oppressive military dictatorship. The now saint was assassinated in 1980 when a death squad opened fire as Romero celebrated Mass. Demons that masquerade as polite are a great danger. Pope Francis is warning that they're used whenever the devil cannot attack directly.
Permesso, posso entrare. Suona il campanello. E questi demoni educati sono peggiori dei primi, perché tu non te ne accorgi che li hai a casa. E questo è lo spirito mondano, lo spirito del mondo.
The Holy Father urged Christians to watch out for well-mannered demons. 2 Chilean bishops accused of sex abuse have been expelled from the priesthood on the orders of Pope Francis. Francisco José Cox is 85 years old and the former Archbishop of La Serena. Marco Antonio Ordenes had been Bishop of Iquique. He's 53. No appeal of the Pope's decision will be allowed. News of the removal was announced at the Vatican shortly after Francis met Chile's president. To give us insight into the Pope's decision is Crux's Rome Bureau Chief Inez San Martin, who is standing by in Rome. Inez, thank you as always for being with us. Pope Francis made the decision to expel these bishops from the priesthood last week. Now, there's no room here for any recourse. The decision cannot be appealed. Why is this so unusual?
It is unusual, Liz, specifically because it cannot be appealed. Usually the norm is that there's a process, and the bishop or whoever is accused, a lot of the time is a priest, not a bishop, they do tend to have the possibility of appealing the Pope's decision. However, what I believe is that the evidence against these 2 bishops is so, so concrete, so obvious that there's simply no reason for the Pope to allow for the process to just prolong itself by an appeal.
Inez, let's talk timing here. The Vatican issued the statement about the expulsion on Saturday, shortly after the Pope met with Chilean President Sebastián Pinera. Could this meeting have had an impact on the announcement?
No, it didn't. I mean, to be honest, Liz, I personally, I've been following the Chilean church situation very closely for almost 3 years now, and I knew that this decision was coming on Saturday regardless of the meeting with the Pope, between the Pope and the President. We knew this decision was long in the making. Archbishop Cox himself, for instance, had very strong allegations made against him last year about a case of abuse in Germany in 2004. So the 6-month, 8-month period of wait for the Vatican is just a traditional. Now, what is definitely extraordinary, at least, and is something I should have mentioned before, is the fact that, as far as I know, and I've tried to do my research and my homework here, this is the first time that the Pope announced that two bishops were being returned to the lay state, or removed from the clerical state on the same day, both of them from the same country, for cases of clerical sexual abuse.
Inez, you just mentioned Archbishop Cox and the abuse allegations. He is now 85 years old, and there are reports that he's suffering from dementia. Why did it take so long for the Vatican to acknowledge this and remove him from the priesthood?
To be honest, Liz, that is a question a lot of people are asking today. It's hard to respond. It's hard to understand, even for myself. What is important, and this is something I was talking to a survivor in Chile not 10 minutes ago, and what he was telling me is what is important right now is to focus on the fact that the Vatican is finally moving. And even though it does so at the Vatican pace, which, is always slow and much more slow than we would want it to be, the Vatican is finally moving, and it's taken 4 very decisive decisions when it comes to Chile, because we need to remember that these decisions that were announced on Saturday of the Pope laicizing 2 bishops come actually not less than a month after the decisions that he removed 2 priests from the clerical state, both also from Chile.
Inez, how can the church in Chile move forward? What happens next from here?
What I know I would like to see happening, we know for a fact that there are several more bishops whose resignation Pope Francis is going to accept. However, I have it on good sources that he's having trouble finding good, reliable people in Chile. He's made the mistake of trusting the wrong people when it comes to Chile before, and he wants to make sure that if he finds a long-term solution, he doesn't make the same mistakes, because he simply cannot afford. There are too many people who have suffered too much for too long in Chile.
All right, Inez, and we'll definitely be checking in with you about that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Liz.
Cardinal Blaise Cupich is saying it's time for bishops to give up some of their authority. The Archbishop of Chicago is making the case for the creation of a new national body of lay people that would take over investigations of misconduct allegations. He's planning on proposing the measure when the U.S. bishops hold their annual meeting in November. There's a lot more news headed your way. Bishop Frank Caggiano is moments away. He's in Rome at the Youth Summit. The shining stars of the Brooklyn Diocese, people who welcome the strangers among us, are honored by Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. A tradition in the Bay Ridge neighborhood, the Ragamuffin Parade ahead of Hollywood. A priest started it decades ago. The kids still love it today. Do you have a story idea, something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you. Keep this email handy, newstips@thesalesmedia.org. We'll be right back. President Trump and the First Lady visited some of the devastation left behind in Florida and Georgia after Hurricane Michael. 5 days ago, much of the Florida Panhandle was torn apart by the storm. The commander-in-chief was in the state to see the damage firsthand. Tens of thousands of businesses and homes need help. Brock Long, FEMA's director, says the agency is ready.
Damage is so widespread. We've registered over 20,000 people already in individual assistance within FEMA.
Trump has pledged the areas impacted will have all the help they need to get their communities back up and running. The president is sending Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Saudi Arabia to find answers in the wake of the disappearance of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The missing man was a former Saudi royal insider who became a vocal critic of the government. On October 2nd, he entered the Saudi embassy in Istanbul and hasn't been seen since, raising fears he's been murdered. Turkey wants to search the Saudi consulate. The latest now on the big summit in Rome. The Synod Fathers are being told that listening must move quickly to action. The Pope convened the bishops of the world at the Vatican for the meeting. The top goal of the Synod is better connecting young people to the Church. Bishop Frank Caggiano from the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, is part of the team representing the United States at the Synod in Rome, and he joins us now. Bishop, it is so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be with you.
Bishop, you, Cardinal Cupich, Archbishop Gomez, and Cardinal DiNardo are part of this U.S. team at the Synod. What is it like representing the U.S. in Rome this year?
Well, it's been a tremendous experience. Yeah. There are about 260 bishops here from all over the world. And just to get a sense of the diversity of their experiences, the diversity of the experiences of youth and young adults, it's just been, for me, a tremendous experience, educationally, spiritually, and of course, to be with the Pope every day morning and afternoon sessions is a tremendous blessing.
Bishop, you have been very vocal about the need for the church to reclaim its credibility by addressing the clerical sex abuse scandal head on. Now that we are a few weeks into the synod, do you feel that it's been adequately addressed?
It is. I think there's a growing consensus now among the bishops that we're going to address the issue in whatever final document comes out as a prelude to the February meeting, which the Pope has already called, which will get more into the details, procedures, and all the rest that needs to be done. But our task is to acknowledge the hurt and wound, to invite young people to walk with us as we walk towards a solution, and to ask forgiveness, which I think is part of the credibility issues for us as leaders.
Bishop, as you just mentioned, the focus of this synod is on the youth, and your experience in youth ministry is quite extensive. How can the church develop new ways to connect with young people and bring them closer to God?
Well, there's a few. I think, first of all, technology is a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
And just like I'm coming to you via the internet from Rome, there's tremendous possibilities. And I think we have to utilize those to try to engage young people and young adults. I also think the path of beauty, which was my intervention at the Synod, is really important. Because young people, I think, live a life that's filled with information that can at times be kind of sterile. And beauty opens the mind, but it opens the heart and engages them affectively. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for affirmation, to be listened to, and to be engaged.
Right.
So I think those are at least two ideas I have.
Bishop, you have obviously a very unique perspective in that you are there and you can bring us this personal insight. What's been the highlight so far for you?
The youth intervention, the young delegates, there were about 32 young adults who are here, who have intervened, have given their own 4-minute input to the Synod Fathers, and they have been powerful. They've been dramatic. There was one young Iraqi man, probably in his late 20s, who spoke about the death of his friends, the destruction of his home, and still keeping the faith. So when I listened to that young man, I thought, my goodness, the problems I think I have in my life pale in comparison to this young man, and yet he's here.
Bishop, what can we expect at the closing of this synod? What's ahead? What are you looking forward to specifically?
Well, the document we will produce is a generic document insofar as it is the recommendations of the Synod Fathers to the Holy Father. But the real document is what the Holy Father will write. That will not come out until the winter of next year. And what I'm looking for is general direction. Because the truth is, young people in Bridgeport have a very different experience than, say, young people in Nairobi or Kuala Lumpur or Caracas. So the general principles are to say we all have to be moving in this direction. Now, individual bishops with their leadership, they need to sit down and say, okay, how do we make this real in Brooklyn, in Bridgeport, wherever else it may be? So I think the Holy Father is going to give us the broad strokes of what we need to do, and then we have to roll up our sleeves and do it in our own diocese.
Bishop Caggiano, thank you so much. You always bring the message close to home, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you, and God bless you from Rome. God bless.
Pope Francis is showing his support for TPS holders. 11 Salvadoran children whose parents are in the U.S. under temporary protected status met with the Holy Father before the canonization of Salvadoran native Oscar Romero and pledged his support for their parents' immigration status. TPS allows those affected by conflicts in their home countries to live and work in the U.S. It was set to expire over the next several months. There are dozens of new shining stars in the diocese. 33 people from various ethnic ministries in Brooklyn and Queens were honored by the Diocesan Migration Services at its annual Shining Stars dinner over the weekend. The honorees represent countries like Pakistan, Ecuador, Haiti, Guatemala, Lithuania, and so much more. Migration Services recognizes individuals who embody their mission of welcoming the stranger among us. Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio was on hand to deliver the awards, and he discussed how important it is to celebrate the diversity within the diocese.
A shining star, they who did something special for their apostolates, we have every year. So we have more and more people that are getting involved. Secondly, we see everybody together. It's like the Pentecost coming alive. All the diversity of the diocese is before us. People have a good time. They're dancing. They're talking to one another. So we really see the diversity of the diocese in one place.
The CEO of Catholic Migration Services, Father Patrick Keating, was also in attendance to recognize the shining stars. He calls the recipients the backbone of the diocese for their contributions to the community.
These are people that are really making America great. They're people that are making our diocese great, and they're people making our city great, because they're people that care about families. They care about their community. They're hard workers, and they're an inspiration for all of us to what we all can achieve, and that's why we honor them.
In total, 12 honorees received their Shining Star Awards at the event, while 16 additional recipients will be recognized on Friday. Still to come on Currents News. The Ragamuffin Parade, a great tradition in Brooklyn. Tonight, you'll learn the reason behind the name. We'll be right back. Ghosts and goblins, villains and superheroes all on display during the annual Ragamuffin Parade. The sight of little ones in costumes, always a great prelude to the spookiest night of the year. And as Currents News' Katie Engesser reports, the ghoulish procession never fails to scare up some smiles.
The season of scary monsters and dastardly villains is finally at hand. But in Brooklyn, kids are more happy than horrified. That's because of the Ragamuffin Parade, an annual tradition that brings the Bay Ridge neighborhood together for some good old-fashioned family fun a few weeks before the big day.
Having trick or treat.
From comic book heroes
Island
to heroes in uniform,
fireman,
and even some major historical figures.
Mozart is a composer from Salzburg, Austria.
Kids are encouraged to dress up or down in their most creative costumes.
It shows the Halloween spirit and it gets the kids excited.
The march down 3rd Avenue first began over half a century ago. Former pastor of Our Lady of Angels, Father James McKenna, thought the parade could be an alternative to door-to-door trick-or-treating. But there was one rule.
Only homemade costumes, nothing purchased.
Many kids wore their parents' clothes, and thus the parade got the name Ragamuffin. Now, decades later, thousands take part, a tradition that has been passed down from generation to generation.
It was incredible having my daughter involved in it. Now my daughter has her son involved in it. My grandson, we march every year.
I've been to Ragamuffin since I was this small.
And the yearly parade is always a top favorite for the kids of Brooklyn.
Which is better, Halloween or the Ragamuffin Parade?
The Ragamuffin Parade.
I was more excited about this than Halloween.
Whoa. Well, maybe not for everyone. In Bay Ridge, Katie Engesser, Currents News.
That was so adorable. I love the baby in the laundry basket. Definitely my favorite. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. I hope to see you again next time.